The From Busy to Rich podcast helps financial advisors grow their businesses beyond the products they sell and the assets they manage, increase profitability, and reclaim their time by providing strategies and insights that will not only change your life, but practice.
Well, welcome everybody to the From Busy to Rich podcast. And again, the reason we're here, our win, is we want to inspire you and everybody around us to increase profitability and quality of life, not just for themselves, but for everybody that they serve. And I'm super excited, guys, about today, because today I get to ask the questions. I have a really good friend of mine that's here. He's a business owner, entrepreneur, incredible thinker. We have great conversations, and he's also a doctor. And he's not only a doctor, he is my doctor. So I am super glad to have Dr. John Lamansky on the show. John, buddy, thank you so much for joining today.
Hey, Wes. Yeah, great to be with you.
Yeah, as we were leading this conversation, there's so many overlaps and so many things that I think are going to be relevant into the day in the life of an advisor, both on the field and off, I would say, if you want to use that language, and how you work with people and to make their lives better, to increase their profitability and quality of life. Even it may come from a slightly different angle, but it is a lot of the same mental thought process and patterns we follow. So John, it would be helpful, I think, if you could tell everybody, what is it you do, man? What is it? What is that lights you up, that you really love about the work you get to do, and kind of what led you to this place?
Yeah, of course. So, my ultimate goal is to teach people how to be healthy, without needing the medical profession. So I'm trying to put myself out of business, essentially, which is
Awesome.
not a good business model, but it works. But basically, so I was trained classically internal medicine. I went down the route of being a, hospital medicine doctor. And over time, I realized that if you're in a car accident, trauma situation, hospital is the best place to be. But if you're trying to really be healthy and prevent chronic medical issues, Western medicine doesn't do a good job of that. And, over time, seeing people struggle with their health, it became clear to me that there has to be a better way of kind of preventing disease. Um, Part of that was I had my own kind of health issues in terms of I was always a fit, young, healthy person, and did some lab work. This is 20 years ago now, but found that I was pre-diabetic or going down the wrong direction. And at the time, I was doing all the standard recommended, type of nutrition. I was a triathlete, so I was working out a lot, had, very little body fat. So I was kind of shocked to see that, despite doing what I'm told should be the healthy way of doing things, I was actually going down a different direction. And that really led me to start researching, is everything that we're telling people as far as how to be healthy accurate? And at the time, internet wasn't as, obviously the wealth of information wasn't there. So I was going to libraries, I was reading books, and really figured out that a lot of the core tenets of what we tell people as it relates to health may not be accurate. And so really figuring out, why is that? Number one, why are we telling people certain things that may not be accurate? And then how do we do it so that we can actually get people healthy and off medications instead of just, hey, you have high blood pressure, here's a medicine. You have diabetes, here's a medicine. Because that route of just piling on medications doesn't actually address kind of the root cause of most health issues. As you mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur. So before I went to medicine, I was actually working on Wall Street. So I had some background in terms of finance and always liked the idea of business. So I got into telemedicine before it became kind of very popular. And then I became part of a company that started tracking health devices. So things like Apple Watch, glucose monitors, Oura rings, etc. And started marrying those things together to where I could track data on people. I could use telemedicine, and I felt comfortable with it. And then I also could start helping people try to either reverse things they were dealing with, or prevent diseases down the road. And so I started you could call it a number of things: concierge, wellness, prevention, clinic, and started working with mostly high net worth individuals, CEOs, entrepreneurs, people who I think are really driven to become successful, but it may be at the cost of their own health.
Yeah.
And started marrying those things together because at the end of the day, what you do and what I do is we try to give people time. So you give people time by financially keeping them stable, making money, etc. I give people time by, giving them time, like actual physical time, to where the worst thing you can have is all the money in the world and, horrible health, because at that point you can't really enjoy the money. And so you and I got connected through a mutual friend. And I think the first conversation we had was, "Hey, I'm on a statin. Do I need to be on a statin?" And I said, no. And, I think that really triggered something in your mind where it was like, well, why is he saying that? Because every doctor who's told me that I've talked to said, yeah, you should be on a statin. And eventually we connected, and obviously, the rest is history.
Yeah, man. Well, I love that, and shout out Taylor Sledge. I know if
Yeah.
you're listening to the podcast, he's a good buddy of ours, and we got to spend a whole chunk of days hunting together on his ranch in Mississippi. I think they call them farms there, though, not
Yeah, yeah, which
ranches.
doesn't make sense to me, but
Yeah, in Texas, it's a ranch, so that's
yeah,
that's how
yeah.
we roll. Um, Man, and you're right, because listen, here's what everybody listening to this podcast, they are strivers, they are high performers, they want to get stuff done. Nobody's tuning in to this to go, "Well, I'm just a little bored, I need some entertainment," but we hope you're entertained, but also this particular stuff is about people who wanna get stuff done,
Mhm,
and you said something that I wanna come back to that I think is really important. You talked about time, and what I love this quote by Richard Koch. He says, it's not the shortage of time that should bother us, but rather our tendency to use our time in low quality ways."
mhm.
We've all got the same amount of time in a day, and that's true for everybody. But how we use our time in the day is incredibly important to the outcomes that we ultimately get to experience, both professionally and financially, certainly there. Also physically and mentally. And the ability for us to be able to focus that energy that we want to put towards this entrepreneurial endeavor that you're trying to get off the ground, just like all the clients that we're working with. You're if you're sick, or if you have a low energy, or you're just not as optimal as you could be, your ability to deliver on that is gonna suffer, and you, having worked with tons of, high-performing people over the years, and watching both their breakdown, but also their hopefully transformation so that that's prevented, what are some thoughts you have around any of that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think most people that I'll start working with are very driven. So they're driven, but at the expense of their health. They're not sleeping well, maybe they're doing some sort of exercise. Inevitably, most people have some weight that they want to lose. Um, and it's not a lack of desire. It's a lot of times, a lot of patients I work with, they will have tried multiple different ways of getting healthy. And for most people it's weight. Like weight is the barometer of health, which I don't necessarily agree with. But so it's not a lack of desire, it's not a lack of willpower. It's a lot of times kind of bumping their head against the wall over and over and anticipating, a different outcome than having a headache, right? So
Yep.
they've done Whole30, they've done keto, they've tried some veganism, and it doesn't work. Maybe for a short period of time, they'll have a little bit of success, but everything that they've done is not sustainable because it's not built into their routine. So you're
Yeah.
a very like structural kind of systems person.
Yeah.
And I think what's really important in order to have a long-term, healthy, successful kind of program, you have to be able to build it into your routine, into who you are. So I think the mindset of being able to convince people that, hey, a lot of times I'll tell you, hey, just trust me, do this. And I won't explain why. And you'll start to do it. And then over time, we'll start talking about, okay, why am I telling you to do this? What is it accomplishing? And I think that works very well with a lot of kind of driven people. They just want to do it. And then down the road, understand, okay, why am I doing this? And that's how I think people really buy into the programs that I'll create for them, is because they start to see success. And once you start to see success, then it becomes reinforcing. And then at that point, it's okay, let me understand, why is this working? And then that tends to be a lot better than kind of the traditional model is you go see your doctor every 6 months or a year. They draw labs and they say, okay, your cholesterol is worse. Here, we got to increase your statin. Or your blood pressure is worse. We got to double your medication. But you're not really understanding, why is that happening. It's almost like this concept of it's inevitable. As you get older, you're going to age, you're going to
Yep.
have health problems. It's inevitable. Whereas the reality is that's not necessarily true. You're just not doing the right things to either, prevent disease or reverse disease. So we work a lot with, number one, building structures. And then number two, obviously the educational component, so that you understand, okay, why is this actually working? And then down the road, you'll start to see the weight loss, and then that becomes obviously, self-reinforcing.
Yeah. So I love this. I want to hit two things real quick. One is, so our listener base, as I told you, they're predominantly in the financial planning
Mhm.
realm, running businesses. Some are just starting. Some are way down the road, huge, successful, and then a lot of things in between. Um, and so, for a couple clarifying points for the younger guys, so let's say and girls that are under, let's say, 30 years old, um, I don't even think they know when you say, "I was on a statin," like, what that is, because
Yeah.
they're like, "A what? How old is Wes?" It sounds like a really old person thing, and so here is, and I'm 47, guys, just as a reminder, but, when I met John, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and listen, I worked out, 5 days a week at Orange Theory, so not a casual workout. It was there, and I was going to the Cooper or the this clinic every year whether they would do all the tests on you, treadmill stress test, and take your blood work as John was talking about earlier, and then they eventually said, "Wait, like cholesterol's really high." And for your age, I mean, not out of bounds, but it's too high for where your age is. We'd like that to come down, and so we need you to take these things, and which was, cholesterol medicine or statins to bring that down, and you find there's most of the time that is with my friends and guys that are older than me, that's a common response to that thing that occurs as you get older. Can we hit on that one thing real quick as to why is it that the general medical profession, doctors out there would say, "Hey, here's what you need to do."
Yeah, it becomes a little bit complicated. I would say, medicine now versus medicine 20 years ago has radically changed in terms of the way that it's set up. So 75% of doctors are going to be employed by big systems, either big hospital systems, big, conglomerates. And so at this point, it's really a top-down approach. You're giving guidelines, and those guidelines are telling you, if A, then do B. So if cholesterol's high, do statin. If blood pressure's high, do medication. It's almost like an algorithm. I mean, at this point, we've talked a little bit about things like AI and the influence in different industries. That's essentially what they've built, is the backbone for AI-induced, medical care, which will be part of the landscape. But it becomes something where back 30, 40 years ago, you had a relationship with your doctor. So your doctor would know everything about you, everything about your family, maybe would be treating your kids. And so they would look at the big picture of, okay, this is Wes. He's at the time, let's say early 40s. Yeah, his cholesterol is high, but what else does he have in terms of risk factors? Because at the end of the day, if your cholesterol is high, does that mean that you're going to have heart disease down the road? It may or it may not. It's not necessarily the end all be all. If you have high blood pressure, diabetes, you're obese, you have family history, you smoke, you drink alcohol like crazy, your risk profile is much different than somebody who's in their 20s and has maybe, yeah, okay, their cholesterol is a little bit high, but they have no other risk factors.
Yeah.
It became something where, in order to get reimbursement from insurance companies, from the doctors actually getting their bonuses, you have to hit certain metrics. So if 90% of your patients are not taking a statin and their cholesterol is high, you don't get your bonus. So there's a financial component, and then there's also a top-down, this is what we do. So it takes a lot of the control from the doctor, and it really places it into protocols and kind of a structured system.
Yeah.
But I think what's more important is, and kind of what I do, is looking at, okay, number one, what is your risk profile? And is that something that you really need to address? Now, there's that component. Then the other component is, does cholesterol cause heart disease? And this is probably one of the most, challenging questions, I think, in medicine, because it dictates a lot of what our treatments are. I will make the argument that cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Cholesterol plays a role in heart disease, but it's not causative. So the analogy I like to use is, let's say you're driving by a house and it's on fire, and you see firemen there. Would you say that the firemen caused the fire? No. They're there to put out the fire. And that's somewhat of the role of cholesterol. There's damage to the blood vessel, and in order to fix that damage, cholesterol is used. So should you lower cholesterol, or should you fix the reason that you're having damage in the first place? And that's kind of the approach that I take. Now, there'll be some people who have a genetic component, the cholesterol is in the 5,000s. Sure, those people are different. But for the majority of people, if you address the reason that something is happening, cholesterol is not the issue.
Yeah.
So, if you actually look at distribution of cholesterol levels on the very high range, so greater than 500, I'm talking about total cholesterol, your risk of dying from everything is higher. Less than 140, 130, your risk of dying from everything, and I'm talking about dementia, strokes, falls, cancer, is actually higher. So this idea that you really need to drop cholesterol down to the lowest level, actually, if you look at data, doesn't really hold water. But I think from news, from movies, from every other doctor, you've been told since you were a little kid, cholesterol causes heart disease. So it's ingrained in our conscious that if you have high cholesterol, you better be on a statin, or else you're going to die, tomorrow. And that is probably the biggest barrier that I have to convince people, this is not actually accurate. And there's a lot of things like that in medicine now, especially now where, we do things because we've been told that this is what we need to do. But if you actually look at the data, it's not really accurate. Take things like vaccines, for instance. Obviously right now we're in 2025. There's a big argument. Should you do all the vaccines? And on the one end, you'll have absolutists who say, yes, every vaccine is the most important thing. It's going to save millions of lives. And then on the other hand, there's people saying, hey, show me the data that supports that. And the data is not there yet. So it's really, I think, analyzing dogma that's out there and understanding, is that accurate, or is that just something that we do because we've been told that that's what we need to do?
Man, and I got to tell you, that is something on this show we talk about all the time, is our tendency to um, do life by default rather than by design. And I think there's so much to that. One is just being clear about what is it I want, where do I want to go, instead of inheriting from culture, society, a corporation, a manager, or even a younger version of yourself.
Mhm.
This, well, we do this because that's what I want, but really taking the time to do that. But then also paying attention and regularly challenging your your own operational assumptions, the things that are in there and why are they in there, which is what I've loved about all of our conversations. Um, what I'd love on that, because there's like what you do is very similar to us, is like you know, you and I had deep conversations about, okay, Wes, what is it you want? What is it you're hoping for out of this? And we kind of talked about it. Okay, tell me about what you're doing now. Tell me about the what does a week, a year, a month in the life of you look like? And and then and I just kind of walked you through everything, walked you through all the stuff that was going on. And you're okay. In light of that, now let's talk about some things that we can start to blend in to the rhythm of your life. Not a okay, we're going to radically change everything. Like,
Yeah.
because New Year's resolutions don't work, right? Because they try to change everything we don't like once a year. It was like, okay, can you do these things? Because if you can just blend these in, things will get better. And then we'll keep adjusting and tweaking. One of the best definitions of meaningful financial planning I ever heard from Carl Richards was meaningful financial planning is about the alignment of the use of capital being your time, talent, energy, attention, money, with what you really care about. And that's kind of the process that you use for optimizing health mentally
Mhm.
and physically. And so when you take the time to really customize and work on that, if you were going to go through a, because you know, like I said, wide age bands listening to this podcast, um, and some this is just not even a thing resonant in their mind. If you're still listening to us by this point, you know, um,
Thank you.
so but there are some like I know it's like you really want to know the person, you really want to know what they want and where they want to go. But if we can just agree on this, everybody would like to be have the highest amount of energy and
Mhm.
that lasts as long as it can, and be able to give good mental thought to the work they're doing so that they can execute at a high level, and look and feel good. But of those things, some version of that there are all skate things, right? There are things that, man, if you could blend in these things, this would, and some of these things are obvious and some are not obvious.
Mhm.
If we could walk through that, and again, I'll let you kind of dive into to all these, but one of them that I think is not an obvious one that is light.
Yeah.
Can can you talk about this? Because and guys, I was gonna make us some foil hats to wear because I don't want you to think foil hat, but I just if you can hang with me for whatever credibility I have in your life for thinking, um, and so while because there is science and data behind this. So John,
Mhm.
walk through the whole what is the big get yourself light exposure?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that you'll probably hear in 20 years will be mainstream. So just that as a caveat. So, you know, I this is what I do and this is my passion. So I'll read probably 6 to 7 hours a day on, scientific research papers. It's kind of pathetic. My wife doesn't have a lot to talk to me about because, this is what I do. But the way I look at it is how do we create savages, which is what I'm trying to do. And what I mean by that is, if you think back historically, who were the savages? They were like the American Indians. They were out on the range. So they get up in the morning when the sun rises. They get sunlight. They're usually grounded, meaning that their feet are on the ground. They run around all day, hunt some buffalo, make a fire at night, basically go to bed when the sun sets. That would be the ideal kind of health regiment that I would want people to do. Obviously, that's not realistic. How do you blend that with modern living so that you can live your normal life but still have the health benefits? So, what you'll start to see, and if you listen to podcasts, things like Rogan, Huberman, they're starting to talk about light a little bit. But basically, our whole body, the way our body works, is on a clock. And that clock is dictated by light. So when you wake up in the morning and you see sunlight, so I have you go up, when you wake up in the morning, you wake up a little bit too early. But when the sun rises, you're like halfway through your day. When the sun rises, you go outside, you get sunlight in your eyes, on your body. And what does that do is it basically tells your brain, which is kind of the control mechanism, that, hey, it's morning, we need to do certain things so that we can function optimally. And that kind of goes downstream to every organ and controls things. So if you're trying to burn fat, you're trying to lose weight, it's very hard to do that if you don't have the right signals. So we're bringing in the right signals so that things are going to start working optimally. And then once you've done that, you have to control the indoor lighting. So the indoor lighting, we're exposed to all these kind of horrible LED lights, and the wavelength of light that's being emitted from that has positive and negative effects on your body. So we're trying to kind of recreate what a natural, we call it circadian cycle would be. At night, your body should think that you're starting to wind down, getting ready for bed. But unfortunately, we're in the same LED lighting all night. We're on our TV, we're on our phone, we're on our tablet, computer, and that's emitting light that is tricking your brain saying, hey, you're supposed to be awake. So the body is not really understanding what it's supposed to do. So then you go to sleep and your sleep is horrible, right?
Yeah.
So when you wake up in the morning, you're groggy, you have a headache, maybe you didn't sleep very well, maybe you have CPAP on, etc. And so your body doesn't know what time of day it's supposed to be operating under. So what we do is we'll focus on, how do you recreate that normal circadian cycle? So get outside in the morning, get sunlight. And this also goes to another dogma that I think you and I have talked about, which is sunlight is horrible for you, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
every dermatologist will tell you,
Cancer.
if you're
I'm
out
gonna
in the
get skin
sun,
cancer.
you're
Yeah.
going to get skin cancer, right? But if you actually look at the data, people who get the most skin cancer, and specifically melanoma, which is what everybody's worried about,
Yeah.
it's going to be in places where they get the least amount of sunlight. So it's
Mm.
not sun that's causing melanoma; it's the lack of sun and the exposure to the blue light, the other type of wavelengths. But that's very challenging for people to really wrap their
Yeah.
mind around and say, well, every doctor, every commercial has told me, avoid the sun at all cost. And the downstream effect of that is pretty dramatic. So
Yeah.
partially it's understanding why is it important, and then also going through the studies and showing you don't have to worry about the sun. Now, if you go out in the middle of the day, Texas heat, midsummer, you haven't been in the sun in 6 months and you get fried, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
You're going to get skin cancer that way. But if you slowly build up what we call kind of a solar callus, which is your ability to absorb sun, you're going to get significant benefits from that. And also not just from, health benefits, but mental benefits. So
Yeah.
depression, anxiety, ADHD, a lot of that is due to our light environment. When I first told you that, you looked at me like, all right, where's the tinfoil hat, right? But what you've been doing is noticing I'm doing this and I feel
Yeah.
better, right?
Totally.
Yeah, so it's really, understanding conceptually why things are working the way they are, and then, I think dispelling a lot of the myths behind it.
Yeah. So here's what I want to do. I am going to, just like in our world, you used to work on Wall Street, and so if you were to come in and just start prescribing things to our clients, I'm going to do that because I've never like worked in a medical profession, but I have been to a doctor, and I've seen you. If I was going to prescribe like a way, if you want to look better physically, lose fat, keep your muscle, gain muscle,
Mhm.
gain better energy and clarity throughout your day, and be generally mentally and physically happier. Um, here's kind of my program that I'm on, and certainly I know people can modify this, and then you may have things that you're like, well, yeah, and that part we think you should be doing it a little better, but it's I get up early, as you said, and I'm at Orange Theory at 5 o'clock. I get it if that's not the bell that you want to ring here, but and I do 50 minutes of workout, treadmill weights. I then go to this place that has a sauna and an ice bath, and I do 20 minutes of sauna. I do 6 minutes in the ice bath, and that generally is going to be for 5 days a week. That's happening, and then I come home, and by then the sun is starting to come up. So I go on my back patio and I do some, a lot of my morning kind of mental preparation and stuff. But while the sun is coming up, and I'm getting that light, and then clean up and I jump into whatever the day holds for us, and generally am starting to land the plane by 4, and by the time I hit 5, it's over, and then kind of try to then begin to unwind from the day and relax. Now you've added in the kinds of lights I have in my office, the way my computer adjusts for whatever time of day it is, which is good. Um, but that I would tell you, if somebody's just like, look, man, where do I start? If they could exercise with some kind of regimen daily, if they could sauna and ice bath. Maybe we just spend a bit of time talking about those so that people are like, oh, this, what is that? And nobody likes the ice bath. So what does that really help? Because here's what I can tell you is that I've, been not unfocused on this stuff for most, most of my adult life, but certainly more focused. And then working with you, I think it's done. One, gave me clarity. Also, you track the data. I mean, what, when I eat that piece of cake and see my glucose spike, well, okay, but and it's also not a lot like about just you have to be 100% one way, but it's 80% beyond, and then 20% you do whatever you want. But if you're given just like quick, like do this and your life will get better no matter what you're doing, what all of those would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot to unpack there, but I would say, similar to what you do, you collect data, right? So you collect data, financial, business, etc. I collect data. So simple thing would be get something that tracks your sleep and get something that tracks your glucose. So nowadays, a lot of things on the market, right? Start collecting that data because that data is going to give you feedback, positive and negative, to make decisions, right? Because a lot of times we look at health as a weight, as I mentioned. So, like, if you're heavy, you're unhealthy. If you're light, you're healthy. But that is not really the metric that is important. If you do the right things to improve the internal mechanisms of your body, the weight will take care of itself. Okay. So, first off, I would say get some sort of data. And obviously, you probably need to know how to interpret the data. But, for the most part, just get some data, right? Then the sunlight is really the most important thing, I would say. It's number one. If you don't do that, it's going to be very hard to live kind of a optimal life. Now, you could be healthy, but we're talking about optimization, right?
Yep.
So making sure you really get out in the sunlight, especially in the morning, as much as possible is important. Then it's really nutrition-wise, it really depends. So some people can do fantastic on a carnivore diet where they're eating just meat. I couldn't do that. I love meat, but if that's all I get to eat, it'll drive me crazy. But
Yep.
figure out nutritionally wise what works for you. And the way you can do that is by looking at your glucose. So, obviously, if you eat a piece of cake, your glucose is going to go through the roof. Everybody knows that that's not healthy. But, and if you don't mind me sharing this as an example,
Yeah.
you had a pretty big spike the other day. And I asked you about it. You said, "Yeah, I had a sub." I'm not going to say the company, but like a
Yeah.
sub sandwich.
It's
And
delicious.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We don't want to get sued here, but and I think you were kind of surprised the first time it happened. Say, "Whoa,
Yeah.
I didn't expect that," because I thought it was healthy. It had some meat, had some cheese. Yeah, it had
Wheat
some bread.
bread. I had wheat
Yeah,
bread and everything on it.
yeah, I had whole wheat bread. Like this is healthy. What are you talking about? And then this was a while ago, but then the other day, same thing happened, and you only had half the sandwich.
Yeah.
So I think the important thing is not getting down on yourself, but saying, okay, now I know what actually
Yeah.
triggers big spikes in glucose. Because the reason that glucose is so important is because it's controlling that inflammation that we talked about that actually drives a lot of the health problems. So that cardiovascular disease that everybody's on a statin for, well, a lot of it is driven because inflammation is happening inside the blood vessels.
Yeah.
And so can you control your glucose better? And when I say control, I'm saying, less than 140 for most people in terms of spikes. And then as you start getting your nutrition tighter, and figuring out what you can actually eat and keep your glucose under control, you start stepping it down. So if you want to lose weight, it's got to be lower. If you're in a maintenance period, you can probably range a little bit higher. But that's what I think the importance of the data is, right?
Sure.
And then obviously some sort of physical activity is paramount. Now, it doesn't have to be 5 a.m. Orange Theory
Yeah.
like you're talking
Right.
about,
Right.
but it can be something as simple as, hey, I'm going to go for a walk after meals at night, right?
Yeah.
And doing something physical. I think strength training is the most important, but you don't have to be, like old school Arnold, jacked. You just have to
Sure.
have some functional strength. Because what does that do? Beyond the cardiovascular benefits, it also starts to use more of your glucose so you can control your glucose levels better. And then obviously we've talked a little bit about this, but controlling your indoor light environment. So getting rid of the bad type of bulbs, getting better bulbs. So making small changes that over time will add up.
And we'll link guys to just some quick hit checklist stuff here in the show notes so that you can go. What is it? What kind of bulbs are you talking about? Well,
Exactly.
we'll show you what those are and show you the. I mean, I wear an Aura ring. That's a great way to track
Mhm.
that and anything that we think would be relevant here.
Yeah. And then finally, focusing on your sleep. So looking at your sleep data, you know, are you getting 8 hours of sleep, but it's all junk sleep? Or
Yeah.
are you getting 6 hours, but it's quality sleep? Because that is going to control the hormone levels that control your hunger. So it becomes kind of a cycle. You're either in a positive cycle or a negative cycle. If you sleep well, the next day you're not going to be starving for, that cake. You're going to eat better, you're going to have more energy, you're going to be more focused, and so the day is going to go a lot better. And then we haven't really talked about this, but the productivity will increase because
Totally.
if you feel good and you're sharp and you're on and you slept great and you got some physical activity, your productivity goes through the roof. And so there's a net benefit.
Yeah.
You mentioned the sauna, the ice bath. Then it becomes a question of, how much do you want to contribute or how much time do you want to contribute to optimizing your health? If you're dedicated and you're really trying to get to the best that you can be, I call you Wes 2.0, then, start incorporating other things. So the sauna, the ice bath, they become synergistic in terms of getting the weight off, but also improving that internal mechanism that I talked about so that you become, a much more efficient energy burning machine. And obviously there's other benefits from it, in terms of mood, cognition, joint inflammation, but you're really trying to kind of undo a lot of the damage that you've done over the last 30 years or so. And I think the most important thing though is figuring out a structured routine that you can, tolerate
Absolutely.
and actually look forward to. And one thing that you said on a call the other day, which I absolutely love, is I'm asking you about the ice bath. And, initially you were like, all right, this is going to suck. Are you sure I need to do this? Yeah, just try it. So you started, and I think at first you were doing maybe 60 seconds, 90 seconds. I was like, how's it going? And because I hear my ears ringing, I'm sure somebody is
Yeah.
saying something bad about
6:30
me.
every morning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And he said, it sucks. So, okay, just stick with it. And now, you're a beast doing 6 minutes. The other day, you did 2 sessions
Yeah.
because of a special occasion. And you said something which was, I think, key. You said it went from discipline to desire.
Yes.
That's really what I think. If you were to encapsulate what I'm trying to do in a quote, it's that.
Yep.
It's, you know, discipline, meaning, okay, he's telling me I got to do this. I have to do it. It's going to help me with my health. To now, oh, I actually like this.
Yeah. I get to.
It actually makes me feel good. Yeah, you'll see the weight come off. That's, again, I think, kind of a byproduct, but it becomes something where you actually look forward to,
Totally.
and that is how you sustain, I think, long-term health. It's not, you know, worrying about, oh, I got to see my doctor and he's going to tell me, I gained 10 pounds and I'm a fat bastard and,
Yeah.
not doing anything he's telling me to do. It
Yeah.
becomes like, all right, I know how to, optimize my health because I can see the data, I'm getting feedback, and now I really enjoy it. And that's what we're trying to get people to.
That's great, man. Well, as we kind of wrap here today, and there's so much in this. We could go for hours. We're not a long format podcast, so as the listeners know.
Yeah.
Um, just a couple things. If people, some people take this and just start implementing some things there, and some people want to go deeper. And how can someone connect with you guys, with you, to potentially see if this is something that they want to like be more formal instructed with, like I did?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, probably easiest is just email doc@alphamwellness.com. I'm pretty selective of who I'll work with
Sure.
because, um, not to make me seem like, a fancy guy, but because while we've talked about the simple things, it really has to be something where you're willing to commit to it
Yeah.
and do the things, like you said, the tinfoil things without not necessarily questioning them, but just with the trust that, okay, there's
Yeah.
a reason behind this. Um, but otherwise, people I think can start with something small. So if you mentioned one of the clinics that you've gone to, and there's a lot of clinics where they'll do, this $1 million workup. You'll get a PET scan, you'll get an MRI, you'll get, lab work through the roof, and then they'll give you a package and say, here. And, you know, I think it becomes overwhelming for people to
Absolutely.
where, all of a sudden I got to do 20 new things and I have kids, I got a job, I have a life. I don't want to do that. And those people will not be successful because it's too much. So I would say pick one thing and start with that. So maybe your nutrition's not the best. Maybe you drink too much alcohol. Maybe you don't get outside at all. Pick one thing, work on that. But don't do the, New Year's resolution where it's like, I'm going to do 5 things. I hate New Year's or January at the gym because all of a sudden you can't get your equipment because everybody's there.
No. Everybody knows treadmill number 2 is mine, and they're
Exactly,
on it.
exactly. Luckily, we go early enough so that usually there's not that many people, but
That's right.
don't do a New Year's resolution. Say, okay, today I'm going to start with this.
Yeah.
And then one last thing that you mentioned is the 80-20. It becomes something where depending on what your goals are, where you're at, you can have leeway in terms of like 80% of the time, I'm going to be focused. And then 20% of the time, like we're coming up to a holiday, I tell every patient that I have, for this
Yeah.
holiday, don't think about anything. You
It's
know,
gonna be spring break for Wes. I'm eating some bread, all kinds of
enjoy it. But afterwards, get back and start day one, and that I think is something that is sustainable.
Well, and just one last thing as we, close here, I think sometimes, especially extreme people, and if you're listening to this, you are an extreme person, in case no one's told you, although people have probably told you, right? So, we tend to be, if we can't be all in, we don't go in at all.
Yeah.
And what I know is, even if, as I say, in your mind, right, or all in is working out for 1 hour a day, and you, for whatever reason, season of life, or just the way the day is shaping up, you couldn't work out for an hour. You'd only have 15 minutes, or
Mhm.
you'd only have 30 minutes. So you can't be a 10, but listen, you can be a 5, and that's better than a 0, right? And you may have blew it on that meal, or you gave in to whatever that was, and or the negotiator in your head had but just do the next right thing as much as you can, and don't worry about perfection, just focus on process, and every day that begins to compound. So, man, John, it's been great, and I sure appreciate, everything you do for me and my family and our wellness journey. And man, look forward to having you back on the show sometime soon.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me on. Obviously, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully, this gave a little bit of insight for people who are listening that you can optimize your health without having to do something insane. So,
Awesome. Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to From Busy to Rich. If something in today's episode sparked an idea or hit a nerve, don't keep it to yourself. Follow the show, share it with a friend, and let's keep building a community of advisors who want more. You can find more resources, tools, and free content at wesyounglive.com. We'll see you back here next time for more real conversations about building the life and business you really want.